On a freezing night in Castile, a woman dressed in black orders the coffin to be opened.
Open the coffin.
The body has been dead for weeks, and yet she wants to see it. Touch it. Make sure it's still hers. No one dares contradict her. No one calls her mad, at least not aloud. They say she spoke with the corpse of Philip the Handsome, that she slept beside his coffin, that she paraded him across Castile for months, with a broken heart and a vacant gaze. They say many things, but one truth remains. Joanna never stopped mourning Philip. While the world whispered about her sanity, she was led alone into the darkest corners of the castle. Her footsteps dragged. Her sobs echoed with the slam of every closing door. No one explained anything. No one answered her. She only knew she was being pushed aside, that her tears no longer mattered, and that soon her voice would fall silent. Joanna, daughter of the Catholic monarchs, Queen of Castile, mother of Emperor Charles IV. The woman who could have ruled half the world, but was locked away for loving too much. But what if it was all a lie? What if Joanna's madness was an invention, a prison built with words, a throne stolen by the men in her life, her father, her husband, her son? This is the story of a queen without a crown, of a woman turned into legend, of a prison without bars, and a love so fierce the world called it insanity. Her story begins where others thought it ended, in the silence of a crypt. But to understand her imprisonment, we must go back to the days when her name was not yet a threat. To the halls of Toledo, where the third daughter of one of the most powerful couples in history was born. It all began there. She was born November 6, 1479 in Toledo. Her name was Joanna. And though she was born a princess, she knew from the beginning her life would never be hers. She was the third daughter of Isabel of Hamzan of Castile and Ferdinand II of Aragon, the Catholic monarchs. The couple who unified Spain, expelled the Moors from Granada, and financed Columbus's voyage to the New World. That court breathed power, ambition, and fierce Catholicism. Joanna was raised with the best. Renowned tutors, a magnificent library, lessons in Latin, music, theology, and Christian morality. She spoke French, understood Latin, knew St. Thomas and St. Augustine. Her intellect was brilliant, but something about her troubled Queen Isabella, her independence of thought. Joanna didn't just repeat what she was told. She asked questions. She pondered for hours on what others called dogma. According to the royal confessor, she had a dangerous tendency to philosophize. And in a Spain that had just founded the Inquisition, that was a threat. She was never the chosen heir. That role belonged to her brother Juan, then later her sister Isabella. Joanna was a secondary piece, useful for alliances, but never meant to rule. Still, her mother kept a close eye on her temperament, always hoping she wouldn't stray from the path laid out for her. From childhood, Joanna showed a strong will, intense emotions, excessive weeping, acute sensitivity, and deep faith. She felt everything, loudly. Her days were shaped by contradictions, the rigid confines of education, and the untamable brilliance of a spirit too lucid to cage. But instead of being valued, she was taught to hide it, to obey, to be silent. Because princesses weren't raised to rule, they were molded to serve. Each suppressed emotion, each silenced question, was another brick in the invisible cage that would follow her for life. And Joanna, the woman who would one day be called mad for love, was already being emotionally dismantled by a system afraid of women who thought too much. In 1496, at age 16, Joanna was sent to Flanders to marry Philip the Handsome, Archduke of Austria, son of Emperor Maximilian of Habsburg. The marriage was political, part of Isabella and Ferdinand's strategy to encircle France with alliances. Joanna had no choice, but something unexpected happened. At their first meeting, when their eyes met for the first time in the Flemish court, witnesses spoke of an instant, thunderous attraction. Joanna was bewitched by the golden-haired, blue-eyed young man, described by chroniclers as the most handsome man of his time. And Philip, taken by Joanna's intensity, demanded to consummate the marriage immediately, skipping all formal ceremonies. They locked themselves away for 2 days, oblivious to the world. What seemed like a fairy tale beginning carried the seed of a tragedy. Rumors spread quickly. Philip had lovers. Not one, not two, but several. Some of noble blood. Others cunning servants skilled at moving in the shadows. Joanna knew. Sometimes she caught their scent on his clothes. Other times she read it in the awkward silence of her maids. She couldn't tolerate it. Her temperament, already emotionally intense from childhood, now exploded in jealousy, screaming, tears, and rage. Once, she tore the hair out of a woman she found leaving Philip's chambers. Another time, she smashed a mirror in fury after a fight. She couldn't pretend. She couldn't hide her feelings. And in a foreign court, that was her downfall. What was called passion in a man was labeled hysteria in a woman. Joanna, the Spanish princess, became not a queen in love, but a humiliated wife. And with each betrayal, not only did her heart shatter, the myth of her madness began to take root. Then fate turned cruel. Between 1497 and 1500, a series of unexpected deaths made Joanna heir to an empire. Her brother Juan, the crown prince, died at 19. Then her sister Isabella, Queen of Portugal, died in childbirth. Her son Miguel, who united the crowns of Castile, Aragon, and Portugal, also died. Still a child. The third daughter, the least expected, suddenly became heir to the Catholic monarchs. With that title, Joanna ceased being an inconvenient wife. She became a threat. Philip understood the power she now held. So did Fernando, her father, and both began to act, behind the scenes, in secret letters, through dark negotiations. Joanna was caught in the middle of a brutal game. Philip wanted to rule. Fernando didn't want to cede. And Joanna was the only one with a legitimate right. But the men around her wouldn't let a woman rule, not if they could help it. And if the price was her sanity, so be it. The machinery was set in motion, quietly, in whispered gossip, in royal halls. Joanna wasn't emotional anymore. She was unstable. Her breakdowns over Philip's betrayals, no longer jealousy, but evidence. Exactly what her husband and father needed to cast doubt. Thus began the narrative. Joanna wasn't fit to rule, not because she lacked right, not because she lacked training, but because she was a woman and felt too deeply. Her madness wasn't a diagnosis. It was a sentence, an excuse to strip her of power. The myth of her madness didn't come from what Joanna did, but from what others wanted the world to believe. On September 25, 1506, Philip the Handsome died suddenly in Burgos. He was just 28 years old. The official version said typhoid fever, perhaps from drinking cold water after playing ball. But sharp tongues whispered a darker tale. Poison. Some blamed Fernando's circle, others the Castilian nobility. But no one could prove anything. Joanna lost her mind with grief. She collapsed beside his deathbed, refusing to rise. She didn't eat for days. She refused to bury him. She clung to his body as if her sobs could keep him alive. She had him embalmed. No one was allowed to touch him. No woman was to come near. No one was to look at him. No one except her. She ordered the coffin to be taken across Castile. They traveled by night to avoid stairs. They stopped at monasteries. She slept near the casket. She whispered prayers beside it, words no one could hear. "If I couldn't have him alive, I'll have him dead," she reportedly murmured one night through tears. The procession filled villages with dread. Silence fell as it passed. Some believed the queen's escort brought a curse. Others simply looked away. No one wanted to approach a woman traveling with a corpse as her companion. The Queen of Castile, heir to Europe's greatest throne, crossed the land wrapped in mourning, escorted by a lifeless body. That grief was taken as final proof of madness. But what was more unacceptable for her time? Her boundless sorrow, or the fact that she refused to be ruled by men? After Philip's death, the journey ended, not because Joanna wanted it, but because the kingdom couldn't bear the shadow of a wandering coffin any longer. The political pressure, the rumors, the schemes, all led to one outcome: separate her from the body, lock her away. The coffin was taken to the Carthusian monastery of Miraflores. Joanna protested. She wept. She resisted. And when her eyes lost sight of the casket, something inside her seemed to extinguish. She was taken to Tordesillas, a remote, gray, solitary place. There, in an old palace now turned into a convent, her imprisonment began. But Joanna never left mourning. She wore black. She covered her face. She spoke to herself, prayed in whispers, answered questions no one asked. She became a figure of legend, the widowed queen in confinement, the devoted wife who never moved on, the woman who had loved too deeply, and for that had to be silenced. In Tordesillas, days blurred with nights. Light barely entered through the windows. Her youngest daughter, Catherine, was her only steady companion for a time. Everything else was walls, echoes, footsteps fading beyond locked doors. No one knew what truly happened inside, only that Joanna was still alive, still grieving, still waiting for Philip. Her heart, though broken, still beat. But to the world outside, she no longer existed. Tordesillas wasn't a temporary confinement. It was a living burial. Joanna remained there, under constant surveillance for nearly half a century. First guarded by her father, Fernando, then by her son, Charles Brunner, the future Holy Roman Emperor. She was Queen of Castile, but had no voice, no crown, no power. Royal decrees still bore her name, but they weren't hers. Her signature was a symbol, a shadow, proof that the dynasty was still alive, even if her will had been taken hostage. Conditions worsened. She was surrounded by hostile servants, placed there not to comfort her, but to watch her. She was cut off from the outside world. No letters, no right to make decisions about her daughter. Her world shrank to a single dark room and unresponsive stone walls. Charles I visited her only once, and that when he needed to improve his image as heir. He entered the room, saw his mother, aged, ragged, and left convinced, or wanting to be convinced, that she was no longer fit for anything. Power has no mother, and Charles no longer saw her as such. Joanna began talking to herself, retreating into endless prayers. Her appearance deteriorated, rags for clothes, matted hair, bare feet on cold stone. She was barely fed. Some chroniclers say only stale bread and water. Her body aged in a damp, dark room, as if the world didn't just want to silence her voice, but erase her very existence. She wasn't locked away because she was mad. She was made invisible because she was dangerous. Her royal blood, her rightful claim, her intelligence, too inconvenient. But the nightmare never ended. The years passed, one after the other, silent, the same. Joanna outlived everyone who imprisoned her, but never escaped them. Bars weren't needed, only the world's forgetfulness. Was Joanna truly mad? Or was that simply the price of being born a woman, of loving too much and inheriting too much power? For years, the court painted a convenient portrait, an unstable queen, unfit to rule. But the testimonies that survived that narrative reveal a different woman, lucid, wounded, but not insane. One revealing moment came when St. Francis Borgia visited her at her son's request. The meeting was long, intimate, and the result unexpected. Borgia wrote that Joanna spoke coherently about theology, politics, and faith with admirable clarity. Her mind, he said, remained intact, and he wasn't the only one. During the Comuneros Revolt in 1520, rebels sought Joanna's support to legitimize their cause. They found her calm, informed, aware of the conflict. But she refused to sign anything, knowing her actions would be used against her son. Even after years in isolation, she understood the weight of her choices. and chose silence over betrayal. So where was the madness? In her gestures, her tears, her overwhelming love, or in the will of her father, her husband, and her son to keep her locked away, invisible, erased? Today, historians and psychiatrists agree Joanna may have suffered severe depression, worsened by grief and isolation, but she showed no consistent signs of insanity. Joanna La Loca was not a mad queen. She was a silenced queen. Her alleged madness was a disguise, a cover for betrayal. There was no delusion, only strategy. No illness, only convenience. And still today, from the pages of history, she looks at us and asks, who decides what is madness when the truth is what they fear? On April 12, 1555, Joanna of Castile died in captivity in Tordesillas. She was 75 years old. She had spent more than half her life locked away, isolated, silenced. She died without a crown, without justice, without anyone asking for forgiveness. She was buried next to Philip, the man whose death began her downfall. Irony of fate. The body she had loved and watched over in life became her only companion in death. But Joanna's real burial was not physical. It was narrative, historical. For centuries, her name was a byword for madness. Her story, whispers and ridicule. Her figure, pushed to the margins of royal history. And yet, Joanna was no footnote. She was a warning, a mirror, a symbol of how history treats women who are too intense, too emotional, too bold, too loving, too inconvenient. Maybe that's why today her story returns with force, because there are still many Juanas, still locked up, still silenced, still discredited. Joanna of Castile was not mad. She was human, tragically human, and she was betrayed by those who should have protected her. And if this story moved you, if something inside you stirred at her fate, share her story. Subscribe, like, give her a voice. Break the wall of forgetting, because only when buried truths are told can silenced queens become sovereign again.